Welcome to the Eclectic Collection podcast. We have episode 15 today, Throwdown on the Asphalt. Now, I'd like to premise this by saying that this is not one of my better moments. It is and it's not. It's a funny and yet very telling and kind of horrible all at once memory that I have. And it's always been in my head because I ended up saying something terrible and doing something terrible, but I did it for a good cause, and I don't feel bad about it. I feel bad about what I said. I don't really feel bad about what I did, but it was quite the moment in grade school, and I did it to defend another person, so I feel good that what I did was correctly guided. It's just that, in this season of, I hope, learning from all that's going on in the world and how possible healing and forgiveness, that the message comes through the right way. So I don't advocate violence in any way, shape, or form, and I certainly would never say or want to say anything horrible to anybody ever. But it was a little needed in this story. So hopefully you laugh and get a little lesson out of this at the same time. But the story goes like this. So I was in, K to 12 Catholic school my whole life. And I was in the same grade school, and very many of us were. And by the end, where we're getting to, close to 6th, 7th, 8th grade, it was really dwindling down because a lot of kids would get confirmed and bail out after 6th grade. So we only had like 18 kids in our class. So we're in a little clown collar uniforms with the ugly yellow collars and the green and yellow that is just putrescent. I don't know why they couldn't come up with cooler colors, but whatever. And we'd basically been with the same crowd. So we had a really small class. And it was actually mostly girls. It was mostly guys. It was 12 guys and 6 girls. But the girls would do a lot of the, I'll say, lunchtime tasks. So as you got older, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, you would watch the little kid grades. And like, we were safeties, AAA safeties. Yes, I still have my badge. And you would, take the little guys out to the car line or the walker line at the end of the day. Or you would go down for lunch and little things, help them tie a shoe, open their pudding, put on their coat, whatever they had to do. And so you would watch like the little grades, and they generally sent the girls to do that. And then, if boxes needed to be moved, they would call the guys. So sexist as it was then, oh well, it was what it was, but it didn't seem to bother us because we were all out of lunch doing other things, or lunch was about 45 minutes and we had like a recess outside. Well, it was legit asphalt parking lot pavement, and we didn't have grassy knolls anywhere. The building was a 3-tier. It was a 4-story building, but there was like a 3-tier parking lot that was pure asphalt. Looking back, how safe was it that the guys were playing off of a cliff of asphalt on the second level football? Probably not, but whatever. And the convent sat at the top of where the girls were supposed to be, but they had the least amount of room. And there was a little bit of grass up there, but that awful stink bomb tree was up there. So nobody wanted to be near that. Because if you got hit with a stink bomb, it was game over and you were just smelly for like weeks. I don't care how much you showered. And that really had the least amount of room. But it was okay because the 5th, 8th grade girls were usually doing safety stuff and helping little kids. And the little guys were from K to 4 on the bottom level, the largest aspect of the parking lot in asphalt. So they were all running around together and kickball and whatnot. Because you can't have Catholic school without kickball. So that was kind of the setup of lunch. And I say this because of the 6 of us, the girls, we were generally partnered in 2s to go to a classroom or go outside and watch what was going on or whatever your task was. And generally speaking, I think I'm a nice person. I got along with everybody. But there was always that one person, that one kid. And yes, I would say that my arch nemesis to this day, whether she knows it or not, was in that class. Oh, and yes, she stayed the whole time from kindergarten right up to 8th grade. Luckily, we separated and she went on to public school. And truthfully, I've never seen her again, save one time. And I'll tell you about that at the end. But when you meet somebody, you kind of know right away if you're going to be friends or acquaintances or even like them at all. And there's no rule that says you have to like everybody. But as many a nun and my wonderful 8th grade teacher always taught me, you have to respect them. Although some would say respect is earned, and that's kind of the struggle bus point I'm on with this story today. So I really, from jump back into kindergarten, didn't have a warm fuzzy about this girl. I tried Sadly, we were put at the same little table as kids when you're in little color tables and you get to do your coloring together and you have a little lunch together. She always stole my Snoopy lunchbox. I used to deal with it, not gonna lie. She would put it somewhere and be like, give me back my Snoopy lunchbox. I was nice. I didn't punch her in the face. I thought about it, but I didn't. And it's funny because I have my sister in my head. My sister always says to me, you're so outgoing, and she's really pretty introverted. And she'll say, if you walk into a room of 50 people, you'll walk out with 48 friends. And I said, well, that might be true, but the other two people really freaking hate me. So it's kind of funny because it does kind of work like that. And try as you might, you're just not going to click with everybody. So, you cut your losses and go. Well, from kindergarten, we just clashed. Like, this girl and I just clashed. There was never going to be a time when we were truly friends. I tried. I was polite. I kind of did what I had to do. You're going to have to deal with people and work with people you don't like in your life. But, when you're 5 and, we're both precocious intellectual kids. I basically was 18 at 5 because, I grew up around all adults. I was trying to handle it, I guess, a little more like an adult would. And she was too busy being a kid, and I didn't really get that. So that was problem one on my part. But she was just kind of like loud and wild and mean. And if she could say something or, pick on the obvious flaw, and she would do it to everybody. I mean, I would say that. She was consistent and across the board. And everybody, the guys, the girls, teachers, talk about people behind their back. And I just never liked her. And I thought, ugh. And I would say she was probably Regina George-esque before that was a thing. So if that gives you a frame of reference, thank you, Tina Fey, for Mean Girls. Love it. And she's from very close to my neck of the woods, too. So hashtag Pennsylvania, awesome people that are creative. So this goes on for years, and just suffice to say that for the 12, 13 years of in this case 9, I guess, from K to 8, she was just always a mean person. She's always saying something bad. She's always cracking a joke at somebody else's expense, or just being a nasty person. So this goes on and on and on, and eventually you get sick of it. Well, she would kind of pick on different people at different times for different things, and for whatever reason, in 8th grade, she just got fixated on this other girl that I was pretty good friends with, actually, that was very harmless. She was a nice kid. She had her act together. She had, normal family. She was smart. She was a little quieter, but there's nothing wrong with her. And, she just got fixated on her. This chick just got fixated on her and would not stop. First it was you're stupid, and then it was you're ugly, and then it was you're stupid and ugly, and then it was, you can't do anything right, and you don't have any friends. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And it was either saying something, or she'd write a note or leave it, and you got to understand, we have these little classic Catholic school desks. So you have your own desk and a push-in chair. So it was open. It's not like it was a locker. And there's a little cloakroom in the back. And by cloakroom, I mean a little wannabe curtain that's made of plastic that just closes and doesn't lock. So you could leave things in the back, your cloak went in the back. So you put your coat or whatever if you needed it in season, or hang up a sweater. And our desks were open, so you would just slide folders or books in. So anybody could stick anything in there at any time. And often this nasty person did. So she would leave her a nasty note, you suck, whatever, you're ugly. And then after a while, she graduated to like stuff. So she started putting like Lucky Dog coupons in her desk. You're a dog, which, to me, that's like a great compliment. I love my dog. I think dogs are better than people. I mean, dog is God spelled backwards. Do what you want with that. So a lot of people that are way worse than dogs. Mindy Dog would never stoop to being a bully. Just saying. Murph, maybe he's a little more of a scrapper, but he's still learning. He's 2. I digress. My Sheltie, they're my rental Shelties. They're my sisters, meaning I don't legitimately have to care for them. I just do, but I think I'd forget to feed them. So I'm not really capable of looking after a living thing successfully. But my point, they would not hurt anybody. So this girl's like escalating, and this went on all fall into Christmas, beyond the break. And it was around, I would say it's like nowish, it was like that humdrum late February, March-ish, end of winter kind of time. It was gloomy, and it was just not ending. And this girl, to her credit, she just kind of was sad or didn't say anything. She never fought back. She never really said anything or acknowledged it. We all knew where it came from. And some people did say stuff to the Regina George character. And, you're not cool. Who do you think you are? It's nasty. Like, pick on somebody your own size. But she would always just ignore them or flip her hair and walk away or laugh about it. Or it didn't matter. I mean, if you don't care and you have no remorse, then you're not going to feel bad. So this is starting to escalate. And then one day, and I didn't know this was a plot, but she obviously thought this out. And one day she went so far as to actually put dog food, the wet, yucky kind, in the desk. Now, luckily, it was not smeared all over everything, but it was open and you could definitely smell it. And thankfully, she didn't pour it all over anything, probably because she thought she would get in trouble. But she must have gone in early and done that. So when my friend went to pull all of her stuff out of her desk, it fell. It was pretty contained. It wasn't like as big a disaster, but at that point, it was the breaking point, and she burst into tears, and she was upset, and I was like, why me? What do you have against me? What's your problem? And she ran out of the room crying and got herself together in the bathroom. Obviously, the teacher saw her, and it turned into a thing. And I did have a lay teacher for 8th grade, but, we did have nuns in the building, and the principal was a nun. So I knew, everybody knew who it was, and I looked at some of my buddies like, okay, lunch, this is going down. Like, something has to happen. I can't watch this. So I just looked at the Regina George character with evil eyes like, this is going to happen. We're going to be having a little talk, and you're either participating in said talk or you may be leaving via an ambulance, but it's happening. And everybody, the guys backed me up. The other girls were like, oh my God, like, what's wrong with you? But she didn't really take that much heat. And of course, the teacher didn't want to talk about it because why escalate it? So we just sort of pretended it didn't happen. And then we would deal with it later. Okay, fine. Because of course, nobody came forward, which they would find out. But everybody just acted like, eh. The morning was painful because we had 2 classes. And then classic pretzel lavatory time. And yes, I say lavatory, not bathroom. So it was about a 10-minute gap where you got to buy a pretzel and a little juice drink if you wanted it. Because there was always juice, milk money. And then you had a chance to use the bathroom if you wanted. And then there were 2 more classes, then lunch, and 3 classes. And that was it. So we were more like an 8 o'clock to like 3 schedule. And 11:30 was the beginning of lunch. Well, the teachers would go to the faculty lounge. And since we were the older kids, you'd have like a lunch mom. So usually it was like a couple moms. My mom did it all the time, where they would just wander around the back of the classroom. And then the bigger kids would go down and watch the little kids. So my job as safety captain was to go watch the 2nd grade classroom. And then I would go out on the lower level of the parking lot to just make sure they were okay when they were playing. So I would go in on the lower level at the end of lunch. I was not stationed, thankfully, with her, but I was complaining to my other buddy saying, this is crazy. She does this all the time. She can't get away with this. My other friend's not right. Like, you saw it. This is crazy. She shouldn't be able to do this. Like, she's not getting away with this. I was angry. And she was kind of walking around like, what are you going to do about it all day long? And I just wanted to wipe the smile off her face with my fist, which may or may not have eventually happened. But anyhow, so we get down there. We do our thing, and there's probably a good 20 minutes left. So Queenie comes walking outside and wanders downstairs, which is not her turf, I might add. She's supposed to be on the upper level. And I was glad she wandered down because I think she knew that something was going to be happening. And she walks up to me like, what are you going to do about it? Who do you think you are? Why are you involved? What do you care? And, I can't stand catty people. I just don't think like that. It makes me crazy. Can't you just be normal? And I was quiet and I listened for a little while. And finally I said, you are not nice. No one likes you. No one ever has. You have been evil since kindergarten. You have no remorse. I wonder if you have a soul. You're completely nasty. You smirk after you do a terrible thing. You literally are the epitome of an Eddie Haskell type. You don't mean anything you say unless it's evil, in which case you mean it twice. You're completely self-absorbed. You're a narcissist, and you think you're all that in a bag of chips, and really nobody likes you, and they just tolerate you because you think you're cool. Oh, are you done? Me. I was like, yeah, well, I could go on, but are you even listening? So, who do you think you are? You're not the boss of me. What are we, 5? Somebody always said that. It was such a chick thing to say in Catholic school. You're not the boss of me. Yeah, okay. You're lucky. So I let her rant. And she starts, going after me. And, oh, who do you think you are? And, what do you care what I do with her? And, coming after me. I'm not, you're no better either. And, you think you're in charge or whatever. I said, well, I'm not in charge of anything except down here in the little kids. And she's like, oh, you take that seriously? I'm like, well, yeah, because what if one of them gets hurt or something actually happens? You're talking about, 200 kids floating around. Yeah, well, whatever. Who cares? It's their problem. I said, well, there's your issue. You have a crappy attitude. So again, I'm an idiot trying to approach this like an adult, talking to the human tater tot. And this is getting worse and worse and more escalated. And eventually, it was getting nowhere fast. And she started, resorting to things like cursing, which of course I didn't do because I was in Catholic school. I may or may not have slipped out of that. And she was getting meaner, and she was starting to kind of dog everybody in the class. Then she really went off on my friend. And I think she obviously was trying to elicit a response, which worked in me. And she said, oh, she's stupid. She's ugly. I don't know what you hang out with her for. She's a loser. Nobody should hang out with her. You're a loser too, this and that. I said, I don't care what you think. I am no loser. I don't hang out with losers. That's why I don't associate with you. There's nothing wrong with her. She's a nice person. You want to start talking who looks like what, okay, let's get real. Like, she's not an ugly person. She's a normal, plain-looking person. This girl actually was kind of an ugly person. But, I didn't even go there. I was trying to be nice and yet supportive and firm. And I was getting nowhere. Now, here's where I just need you to put a little bookmark in the story, and I have to tell you a horrible backstory, because this is where I say probably one of the worst things I've ever said in my life. She had, the Regina George character, had kind of a different home life than us. In the 80s, people just weren't, at least not talking about whatever was going on at home if it wasn't the picture perfect, 2 kids, 2 dogs, and a white picket fence. In a house. Okay. So yes, there were people that were divorced, but really not many, not like now where nobody cares honestly about anybody's backstory or baggage. Everybody has it and it's assumed. Back then, you just didn't mention stuff like that. If somebody had a problem or a disability or an issue, it just wasn't as prevalent. Certainly not in the media. There was no social media, didn't have cell phones, but even to each other, people were a lot quieter and more private about stuff like that. And, here nor there, that's just how it was. Well, her mom had passed away in 6th grade. And, and the truth be told, her mom, I think she kind of learned it from watching her. Her mom had very many similar behaviors, or I should say this kid had very many similar behaviors as her mom. She was kind of always the conflictual mom that never wanted to be the homer mom or help out or do things, but, wanted to put her mark on stuff or write a check and walk away, or the mom that wanted to control stuff but then didn't want to show up and do it or be at the field trip, or and it wasn't because she was ill, it was just always that way. Her dad was actually kind of a chill guy. I actually liked him. And there was a hodgepodge of, they had a lot of kids in the family, and all of the kids from years before, because she was second to youngest. She had a little brother, but she had 2 older sisters and an older brother, significantly older, and they had all gone through the same school, and every single one of them was that kid. So, where are you learning that behavior? Okay. And I'm not saying that all great parents have crappy kids, or all, crappy parents have great kids, or, you try the best you can. I understand that. And you hope that if you're a good parent and you have good kids, that's the plan. But, people obviously have free will and can do what they want. But in this case, every single one of these kids was a discipline case, was a problem, got in trouble, had an issue, was a bully, whatever. So much so that the little brother went on to do serious karate, and his middle name should be Cobra Kai because he might as well have been William Zabka. Okay. Literally going for headshots, trying to hurt people. It was just a bad scene. The older brother was constantly in fights. Pretty sure more than one of them got into serious drugs. But again, for fun/problems, not necessarily because there was an issue, just because they all kind of took the worst of how they were raised. And unfortunately, like I said, the mom had that attitude as well. It was very narcissistic, I'm in charge, I'm cooler than you, kiss my ring, you grovel at my feet kind of a family, kind of a way. So here we are, it's been 2-3 years since that happened. And, we're in 8th grade having this fight. So she kept ripping apart my friend, saying terrible things to and about her and me and everybody else. And she just, she's cursing up a storm and saying terrible things. And, what do you care? And what are you going to do? You going to rat me out? You going to tell me that? I said, no. I said, we're going to handle this ourselves. She said, go. What are you going to do? You going to hit me? And she pushes me, okay, in the shoulder, which that's just funny. And I step back like a step. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? And I think it was 2 or 3 times she actually kind of pushed at me, and she always kept pushing my shoulder and my arm. And each time I probably, took a step back or got caught off guard. I never fell, but I'm like, okay, I haven't touched you yet, but when I do, it's going to be 2 hits, me hitting you, you hitting the floor, to quote the Breakfast Club. So she's getting in my space now, and she's getting close to my face. And she's kind of almost nose to nose, which is not something I want to look at, smell, or be near. And she's like, you're this and that, calls me all sorts of terrible things, which I won't say for obvious reasons. But, who do you think you are? And you're nasty, and, you're whatever. And you're not her keeper, and who cares what I do to her? And if you think I did terrible things already, you just watch, because I'm gearing up, and I'm going to start, you see what I leave in your desk, and you see what I'm going to do to her, and I'm going to have her crying, and she's just going off, and she's like kind of enjoying this rage rant. And I just shut her down. Again, God forgive me, it was the worst line I think I've said to a person, but I have guilt, a little bit anyway. And I said, why don't you just shut up, jump off a cliff, and join your mother? Dun, dun, dun. Okay, horrible thing to say. I admit it. Obviously, her mother had passed. No one should talk like that. But it shut her up like that. She instantly didn't know what to say, stopped talking, started crying, and then I flipped it on her. And I said, oh, you're upset? Did that bother you? Was that a sad thing to hear? Should I not have said that? Are you crying? Wait, bully extraordinaire is crying? Oh, we didn't care that my friend was crying, and you've made everybody else cry, even like 5 of the guys and some teachers. But no, you're you're sad, so now we have to back off because you're upset? No, it doesn't work like that. This is life. When you're mean to people, it's called karma. And this is karma coming around to punch you in the face. So I suggest that you back off, shut up, apologize to this girl, never act like that again, and we won't have a problem. Who do you think you are? Now she's totally got tears streaming down her face, and she shoves both of my shoulders at once. Again, I take a step back, and she hauled off to swing at me. And she was so upset that I just sort of moved back, and she got air instead of my face. And I kind of chuckled, I'm not going to lie. And I just clocked her right in the face. One good bam, and she went down, and it was a thing. And now she's crying on the ground in gravel. And at this point, it's total chaos going on around us. So nobody really sees this because we're in the corner where we hide out to watch the kids. And back then there were no cameras or anything. And I'd say 5 minutes until the bell was going to get called and we had to go in. And she's like, I can't believe you. I'm going to go tell on you. I'm like, hey, go ahead, have at it. Tell him I sent you. Because I didn't care at that point, and I knew that, yes, it was awful what I did, but it was deserved, and no one, any teacher or authority figure would have had an issue because of what this kid had tortured and done, not only that day, but for years to every single person, literally including the adults too. Other parents, kids, faculty, you name it. And you don't mess with nuns, okay? You don't say bad things about nuns. You just don't. Notes, things she found, nasty stuff she would do. So I stood there, my arms crossed, waiting for my little kids to come in. The bell rings. She scampers upstairs, and she goes and finds the principal. She goes right to the big cheese. Well, the principal is a nun, who loved me, I might add, and knew, I'm very certain, what had happened, because I'm sure my teacher had informed her. And she went up to her all crying and upset, blah, blah. And I didn't make her bleed or anything. She just had a red mark on her face. And, Terry did this. And she's blathering on to her. And the nun listens and shakes her head, crosses her arms, and looks at her and says, she did use her name, which I will omit for obvious reasons. And she said, "Are you finished?" She said, "Yeah, I wanted you to know what happened. She should get in trouble." And the nun quite sarcastically and surly looked at her and said, "Now, you know that Terry Tenaglia would never do anything like that or say anything like that. So why are you making up stories and lying to add to everything else that you've done today?" And I remember hearing that and just bursting out laughing, because they knew what she did and they knew it was her. And she's like, "I suggest you stop making up stories, and you should be reporting to my office for detention for the next 2 weeks," or whatever she had. She had to go after school and during lunch. "And stop worrying about yourself and the way you're perceived, and other people's thoughts about you are not very kind. So I think you should repent and stop being bad and saying and doing terrible things to other people." So she gave her a talking to, and that was that. And it was quite the moment when we went back in, because she had been taken out to get yelled at and clean herself up. So she was out of the class when we returned from lunch for a good 5 or 10 minutes. And everyone was kind of laughing and smiling. And my friend felt a lot better. And even the teacher kind of was like in on it. Like, she knew it wasn't a planned event, but, and she said something very classic. She was a classy woman, and, she's a very educated woman. And she would say, "Well, I'm proud of you for not using or needing to resort to vulgar words, because educated people don't do that. They have better choices." That was always something she stood on, was like, if you didn't curse, you were smart. You could come up with better words than the vernacular, she would say. And I don't condone necessarily how it was done, but I understand why. And in this case, I believe that you did the right thing. So it was kind of funny, and all's well that ends well. So I felt like one of those movies where, the bully got bullied and the person finally got theirs. And it wasn't meant to be a revenge thing, but it always stuck with me, because after that, and I guess, like I said, it was late March, or late February, early March. At the end of the year, like, we just didn't talk. We never spoke again. Barely made eye contact. We kind of, grunt in each other's direction, but it wasn't worth it. We were leaving our little, 8th grade graduation in June, and we never really spoke again. She didn't bother anybody again, and that was it. And I wouldn't have contact. It was just easier to politely ignore one another than it was to engage in any kind of behavior like that. In the end of the year, June, this teacher was one of my favorites, actually. She's a fantastic person, and she said, everybody's got a card on their desk with a person's name. Again, there were only 18 of us. Each person write one word about the other person and pass them around. So in the end, obviously you didn't write on your own. You would have 17 comments from a friend. So everybody wrote all sorts of things that were, because we pretty much all got along. But when I had her card handed to me, I remember thinking, "Ooh, what am I going to write?" And after much thought, I figured, well, she was kind of brainy, so I'll just write intelligent. So I wrote intelligent. Weeks later, when we got the cards with our graduation packet, I immediately opened up my card and looked right for her handwriting to see what she had written about me. And in red ink, which is a no-no, because black is formal and blue is scholarly, as any good Catholic school person will tell you, red is ignorant. So I'm sure she chose the red on purpose, given our little thoughts on ink. In red, she wrote "smart." And I thought, well, okay, you live. But it was funny. That's all we could come up with that we could agree on, that each of us was brainy, and that was about it. So different types of nerds, I might add, but nerds nonetheless. Although I did have that one big win when we played all around the world, and I beat her in math. That was quite a moment, because math and I are not fun. We're not friends. 1 and 1's 11. So that was my big win against her. I never really saw her again, save one time. I was a freshman, and we were in different schools. I stayed in Catholic school. She went to public school, and I was a cash register jockey at the time at the local Thrift Drug, which has ceased as a company. And my sister was a pharmacist and had got me a job. I was like 14, 15. And it was a Friday night, and I was on from like 5 to 9:30. I guess around 7, this really big mob of 3 or 4 equally Regina George-esque, over-the-top type girls came barreling in, ran for sodas, picked up fake nails, grabbed a couple of snacks, and ran up, just threw everything on the counter. And lo and behold, there she was. And she looked up like, "Oh, it's you." Didn't know what to say. Said nothing. I rang everything up, put it in a bag. Didn't even say the total because they had just changed over to digital cash registers. Thank God on my part. And she threw the money on the counter. I gave her some change, and that was it. She grabbed the bag and walked out. We literally said nothing to each other. And the girls that she was with were definitely trying to figure out what was going on, because she was clearly queen bee of that little posse, and they weren't understanding that it was obvious that you could cut the tension with a knife, and there was thickness in the air, but they didn't know what was going on or what bad thing had happened. And maybe she explained, maybe she didn't, but I never saw her again, which is good for everybody. But I never let go of it. And I don't know, maybe this never fazed her because she never seemed to have remorse about anything. So maybe, something drives you crazy. You're the one holding it. And the other person could care less, doesn't know, isn't aware. Hence why I always say communication is the essence of life. So, do I lose sleep over this at night? No, not at all. I forgot. Ever since I kind of put it to bed that day in 8th grade, I never had to deal with her again. I jokingly reference her as my arch nemesis of all time. I don't want her coming to my funeral whenever that happens, but she's definitely a good example. And having become a teacher, I often tell this story because, kids can be cruel and people can be cruel. And there's no reason for it. It's ridiculous. So if you're one of those people, knock it off. Who do you think you are? Really? You're not the boss of me. And if you're a good person, try to put up with them and ignore and tolerate. But there's a fine line after a while of ignorance and tolerance, and eventually it just becomes ridiculous, and no one should have to live that way. So, just shut up and be a decent person to everybody, and you don't have this problem. Is it so horrible to open a door for somebody or, help somebody if they drop something, or just nod or wink or say hello? Even as an adult, there's people that walk down the hallway that literally hide, look the other way, and don't even say hello. And again, I'm a teacher, and I'm thinking, wow, you're a teacher. Like, what do you do? Stare at the other wall and not talk to your kids when they walk in the room? Like, you can't say hi to me? So I always just obnoxiously, I'm like, hello, hey, how's your day? Just especially with those people, just to see. It's not necessarily quietness. It's more about ignorance. So, you could smile at people, say hi. They don't have to. They could be strangers. It's fine. It's not illegal. Practice smiling. Costs you nothing. And they definitely know on a phone when you're smiling. I did enough telemarketing to know that. I used to have a sticker on my phone that said smile, because the customer knows and the person on the other end can hear it. And that is true. I think you can definitely tell when a person's in a better countenance, or has a better face on than if they're grumpy and they don't. And it takes more muscles to frown. So don't do that. Needless to say, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I do feel bad about saying what I said, but at the same token, it kind of worked out well for that day. It was a attention step. It was an attention step that was grave and needed to yield the result that had to happen. And I just feel that it shouldn't have had to get to that level, but I wasn't the one that made it go there. So I'm happy that my friend would go on, by the way, to never have a situation like that again. Super sonically excel in high school. Really find herself in self-confidence, and not take any crap from anybody anymore. I think that experience transformed her actually into a much stronger person. I certainly watched her evolve. And fun fact, side note, the token new guy, which we never got new people because there were 17 of us, but we got 18 because in 8th grade this one new guy came. And it was a big deal because he was from public school. Look out, he's from pub. He was a nice guy. And he actually, shortly thereafter this incident, thought it was super cool that she stood up for herself and stood up against this evil nemesis and started dating my friend that was the victim. So, and they lasted, I mean, it was a couple months, but that was like a real big news in 8th grade. So it was kind of funny that she came out the victor in all this and really got a lot turnaround for her. Not that her life was bad before. She was fine. There's nothing wrong with her, but it really made her stronger, come out of her shell, and it was a win-win-win in the end. So if you enjoyed my story today and you liked what you heard, then I would say check us out at eclecticcollectionpodcast.com, or you could listen on your preferred platform. I'm Terry Tenaglia. Thanks for listening.